You're live. Um, I will give just a few seconds because nobody ever shows up initially. But I
Mm.
definitely want to thank all of you for joining me on part 3 of our month of June, talking to the younger folk. Um, and so, thank you. Um, we have Tamara here with us. We have Siobhan and we have Kai, and I'll let them take a brief, I don't know, couple seconds to kind of let you know where they're located, what they do. If you want to say your age range, you can, um, and just give a little summary so for anybody who's never met any of you guys before. Who wants to take it?
I'll go first. I'm Siobhan. I'm in my 30s, late 30s. I'm an attorney and I live in St. Croix, but I'm originally from the island of St. Thomas.
Excellent. Thank you, Siobhan.
Hey, good night, everybody. Kai Nelson, 33 to be exact. Living on the island of St. Croix. I wear about 4 hats here in the territory, but I'm definitely here just to be myself and, yeah, as authentic as possible. So thank you guys for the opportunity again.
Thank you. As you know, it's always hard for us to get the mail, so thank you for coming on tonight.
All right, so Tamara, originally from St. Croix, on St. Croix right now, but I'm usually back and forth between Florida and St. Croix. I'm a licensed counselor and a whole bunch of different stuff, but excited to talk tonight.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, for the month of June, we have decided that we're going to just hear from the younger folk since they're always hearing from us. Well, I'm not older. I'm not going to claim that, but hearing our woes and all that. So tonight, I just kind of wanted to pick up from last week. One of the questions that we were talking about towards the end was about raising kids. I know my daughter loves, my kids always tell me that a lot of the decisions that they have made has been because of how I have parented their, my friends have parented. Um, and so it's just interesting to see how everybody is taking on that role. So before we get into other aspects, one of the questions I had posed to you guys was, are you making a conscious decision in raising your child or children to emulate or drastically deviate from the examples given to you growing up? Why or why not? Anybody want to take that first?
I could go first. So for me, mine is actually closer to emulate my parents. The differences that are there are really more personality. Like my parents, my brother, we're a family of 4 originally. My parents and my brother are all like, type A, really scheduled introverts. And I tend to be the one that's more artistic, creative. And so the differences are really kind of there. But as far as my parents were the ones that were kind of the revolutionaries. Like, growing up, we had family meetings, we made decisions based on my brother and I voting. And for 2 parents that, like from my father, his family is from Guadeloupe and Dominica. Um, and he became an American citizen. My mom is first generation. Her parents are Antiguan and Catition. And so the way that they parented us was really the departure from the
Mhm.
previous generation. So I more of emulate the way they raised us.
Wow, that's good to hear. I mean, because again, coming from the Caribbean, you think one thing. I think my mom was that way too, because although she was born and raised in St. Thomas, when she finished high school, she lived in the States for like 13, 14 years. So when she came back, she moved to St. Croix, and we were raised in St. Croix, and so um, when I look back, I'm sure her parenting was a lot different than the way she was raised from well, especially my grandfather, not necessarily my grandmother. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Somebody else want to take it?
Go Tamara, go ahead.
I think for me, it's a combination. Growing up and I guess witnessing the relationships that some of my friends had with their parents. I wish that I had, and I wish I had seen in my family. So in my immediate family, like there wasn't a lot of communication, and extended family included, right? Not a lot of valuing what a child had to say, or really like taking into consideration their feelings, or maybe like explaining the whys of why you need to do this or not do this. I don't know. I think I definitely deviate from the majority of examples I had growing up. I witnessed a lot of, I guess, the stereotypical, like not very affectionate, more authoritarian, and not really like discussing things and having family meetings and stuff like that. For me, all of that is important, you know. I talk to my kids about so many different things. I think I try to be what I didn't have growing up, in the healthiest way possible, without, like coddling or, being the helicopter parent or anything like that. But I really do try to show up as the adult that would have been great when I was growing up.
Right. It's interesting you say that because we've had Shelly Gums on the show. She works for Women's Coalition, and that's one of the things she talked about is that a lot that happened in our generation and beforehand, it was talking to children instead of talking with children. And so I'm really loving seeing the change, as long as it's healthy, where children's feelings are valued from young. So that's excellent. How about you, Kai?
Yeah, no, I think that we all have similar roots. I was really raised by a village, so a lot of what Tamara said as far as wanting to be the parent that I never had really resonates with me because my dad really wasn't around in any holistic manner at all, and then my mom was very young when she had me, so I was essentially passed off to Antiguans to be raised. So now that I'm very new to the game, right? So my son's about to be a year next week. And I'm there. I'm the primary. He's with me most of the times as I'm going to business meetings. He's on my lap. And it's just interesting to see how the community reacts to it. I think, seeing how Kititians walk up to me, how Dominicans walk up to me. I mean, literally the guy was like, my mom would be so proud of you, and it blows my mind because it comes very natural, right? But I was raised by women, so I was raised by caretakers as well, and that's something that passed on to me. So that's what I do with my son. And, for all those reasons, I do think behind, somewhere tucked away, is like, I'm going to be everything my dad wasn't for me. That's really no knock on him because when he had the opportunities, he passed on like life lessons that I cherish to this day. But there's nothing that could replace physically being there, right? And I haven't left my son's side for more than 48 hours total. You know what I mean? So I think that's maybe I don't know if it's a huge deviation because I did have some father figures like sprinkled throughout my life. Surely, as consistent as I'm being right now, absolutely not. So I think that's a huge deal.
And for all of you, was that a conscious decision that you all made, or is that, again, because we have access to so much through social media and maybe because people are talking more, do you think that it was something that you thought about even prior to having kids, or it was just something that over time you're like, I want to do things differently, just because I've seen it differently, or just because I just want to do my thing in raising my kids?
I feel like for me, because of my work, and I recognize the importance of our experiences and how it shapes our view of the world and how we interact with it. Like I had no choice. I had no choice but to always take the material and like pull it back to my life and like reflect and say, wait, is this related to that? And how much of my upbringing affected the way I am in relationships in general. So I feel like I almost had no choice,
Right.
but for it to be something that was intentional.
Right. Okay. Cool.
For me, I definitely wanted to approach parenting, like really be conscious in it. I started out with a lot of like reading a lot about like positive parenting and, just a lot about personalities and, reading about kids' personalities and how do those interact with yours, which is a large part of how I was raised. I think right around when I was maybe like 8 or 9, I think my parents started kind of reading these books because they were like, who is this extroverted child? How did two introverts make an extrovert? And so for me, I just wanted to always be kind of aware of who my daughter was as a person, but also cater to her, listen to her voice, and really be able to parent very specifically to what her needs were. So for me, it was definitely very conscious. And I only have one, so it's probably super easy to do it when you have one, but that's always been my approach.
Yeah, I think on my end, I sort of lived my life for this moment. I was very intentional about, who I laid with, for example. I was very intentional about who I would choose to be my lady and then my wife. And then once she became my wife, which took 8 years, right? What are we now going to do? Which is let's travel, let's get all this stuff out of our system and enjoy ourselves. Because so many people are thrusted into being parents, right? And I was always super cognizant of the impact that had on their lives. So I definitely didn't want that for myself or for my lady. So we traveled, went all over the place, and then on our anniversary made an intentional decision like, yes, now we're going to try to have a child. And then in came Croy. So to be in a position now in my life professionally where I think this is a luxury, by the way. So I want to make sure I'm truthful in saying this because it's a luxury to be with your child as much as I have the opportunity to be. It's a luxury that your child doesn't have to be in a daycare or with a nanny. And those things, as Tamara, I think, is alluding to, impact the way that child sees the world, impact the way that child is growing up. So that my youth has only been around his family. He doesn't know, like, what it is to be with someone that's not family for any extended period of time. And that was very intentional on my part. And I'm happy these questions are really kind of touching on these topics because I think people need to be far more responsible with their bodies. And I know that sounds heavy coming from a man, right? But I think that we take for granted the act of sex and the act of childbearing. And by the time it happens, now it's too late. It's too late to read that book, right? It's too late to say, okay, let me rewind the hands of time here because now this child is here and this child demands your attention in a very real way. So that's my answer to that one. And I don't want to hog the mic, but surely want to make sure I'm giving these questions the right amount of attention.
Yeah, I appreciate that because, again, when I had my kids, I knew that I wanted. I think in my family, I'm like the only one. I'm the one that has the most amount of kids, 4 kids in both sides of my family, right? But I always said, and again, be careful about what you put out in the universe. I always said I wanted 4, and I had 4. But I think life. I just lived life. I tried my best to raise them the best way I knew how. Thankfully, my mom raised me well. My dad was in the picture until I was 7. And then, he's always still been in my life, but not present per se in my home. And I had a great grandparents. So I had a lot to emulate, right? So, but my mom died when I was 22. So I had to raise kids and be a wife with not necessarily a lot of knowledge, kind of like just going on my whim. So I'm really appreciating because, again, for me, this platform is about building and creating legacies. And if there's things that need to be changed, we need to change them, and we need to live intentionally for the next generation, right? And I like what you said, Kai, because even my grandson has been very fortunate that he's going to be 5 and he will be going to school, but he's either been with, I think for his first 3 months, he was with someone in their home. And then he was with like a family member until unfortunately she passed away in August from COVID. And then he's home with his mom. She's like homeschooling him while she works. And so he too has never really been around anybody that is not family, right? Or really close friends. And he's 5. And you can see it intentionally in how he is and how he's showing up and his empathy and caring. And he is just amazing because he's never been in formal anything, So I think that people who have that luxury, it's wonderful. And it's good if you have a village that supports it. Just because of the world we live in now is like crazy. So it's good to hear you guys say that you all intentionally made decisions about how you want to show up for your children.
Yeah, I for me, I think my story is a little bit different than like Kai's, right? Because I got pregnant with my daughter in college, in undergrad. It was my the end of my junior year, so I had her during my senior year. I was 20. I was a baby, and I had to like rely on outside sources to provide care while I was in class or I was at work. Because that's just the way, I was a kid in college in Miami Shores. So, I didn't have the village around me. I don't think there was ever a village around me in around us in Florida. It's always been like a cousin here or, like a partner or, whoever. But it was a really like solo journey. Depending on my relationship status at the time, right? It was either me and my partner, or me by myself doing this parenting thing. And because I knew that all of that played a role, I had to be intentional about when I was there, like showing up, like actually showing up and being present and being interested in their lives, because there were parts of it that I was missing, and mom guilt is real because my third child, actually had to put him in daycare like right away. Like at the end of maternity leave, he had to go straight into daycare so that I could jump back into work. One of the hardest things I ever had to do, but I made sure it was at a space where these people had cared for all of my children. I had a close relationship with like the person that was in charge of the infant room. And,
Right.
she was very, I think I was probably one of the only moms that I would come in and I would nurse before I left. I would come early and I would nurse, and then I would leave him and I would come back and I would nurse again. And then I would leave the daycare. So I had to be like really intentional about how my time was spent. It was so hard. It was so hard. I definitely would say, I would recommend to people, like take time if you can, if circumstances allow and you have that opportunity to be able to set yourself up where it's a little bit easier, because the effects, the spread, it's not just the parents, it's the kids, and the relationships in between.
So I had my daughter, I was 29 when I had my daughter. My mom actually did genealogy, and like for 3 generations back, every woman that had their first child was at the age of 20. So I kind of like beat that by 9 years. And so when I had my child, I was actually living in downtown Miami. My job was in downtown Miami. And I would just like walk 4 blocks and like nurse her on my lunch break, and really just during the day try to maintain that connection. But of course, by the time my daughter was a year, I was ready to move home. It was just, her being with people that were not family, although, her nanny, I still talk to her to this day. Actually, I just visited her recently when I went to Miami, but, and that was like 8 years ago. but I just wanted to be closer to family and for her to really have a connection to the people around her. So we've been here, but yeah, so I've done both sides of it.
Right.
Where it's been that someone in her being in someone else's care and then her also being with just family. So
That's good.
I guess I was gonna say that I wanted to make sure that I also add this to the story as preface, right? Like my mom was in high school when I was conceived, and I was named after her favorite high school teacher, right? Born when she was 18. So I lived that life of being 2 and 3 years old, left in the house by herself, and having to, fend for himself in the sense that come up with my own creative ways of keeping myself engaged because she had to go to work, right?
Right.
I don't want to. I want to make sure I'm not sounding like I'm condescending or I'm speaking from a different place. I'm speaking from this was my reality.
Absolutely. Right.
Deviating was a necessity, right?
Right.
This idea of women having children by themselves, or speaking to a really close friend about it today, is crazy to me. Like she was watching me and said that that's like a team job giving birth, and she looked at me like I was crazy, and because she had her child by herself, right, essentially. And I'm like, man, the counter pressures, the stuff that you have to do for women when they're going through those contractions. And she's like, oh my God, like now that you talk about it, when my mom did that for me, that felt like heaven. I'm like, yeah, I did it for my wife all day long, right? When she was going through the contractions, I was there with her the whole time. We went through prenatal courses together. I was reading like of the mortality rates of Black women going through labor. So, all these topics jump into my mind hearing Tamara and Siobhan speak, because I think, again, it's just like as men of a certain background, we're not thinking about that. I have to put myself in that collective, right? Like these young men aren't thinking about the impact it has on a woman's body. They're not thinking about how this just drastic, the mama guilt. Like there's just certain women that after maternity leave, you gotta go back, or else you can't feed a child. And
Right.
society isn't built around supporting that idea of going back home and being able to breastfeed, and how important breastfeeding is, a connection you have with that you when you're breastfeeding. It's insane to me, Debbie, right? And I just want to make sure that as much as this conversation is moving forward, that I'm the one that brings up the societal impacts that are driving a lot of these things that are happening in our lives. Because sometimes we take that on our own shoulders when we really shouldn't have to, right?
Exactly.
That guilt is being forced on you, my love. Those pressures are being forced on you by the community that you decide to live in. So that's my 1-2 there.
and I will say too, like there needs to be more voices, like Kai's voice. I mean, at the end of the day, when you look statistically, despite the fact that there are a lot of single moms that are Black, Caribbean American, Afro Caribbean, whatever you want to lump us all together as, which I am one. But statistically, Black fathers are the most involved amongst all of the other demographics, but for some reason that voice doesn't come outward. I mean, even if you look on my Facebook page, you will never see anything about me bashing Black fathers, because I have a father that absolutely was so involved with every single aspect of my life. I also have a brother who is an absolutely wonderful father to his 3. It's just that apparently I picked a bad one. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's so many great Black fathers, and this is so refreshing. I'm enjoying this conversation.
And it's so funny because I think I don't know when it started. I think it started sometime around agricultural fair. So Memorial Day weekend, I saw Westgill talking about VI Fathers Matter, and it's so refreshing to see that, and
Yes.
grandfathers. And yeah, that is definitely something that needs to be, because there are good fathers. Unfortunately, the bad ones make it look bad for everybody. And I do feel that even, especially in the newer, the generation behind me, I feel like fathers are not just taking on the role of providing, but actually being present and a part of their children's lives. I've seen that a lot with some of my godsons and my son, and And I'm very, very happy to see that, because I think that the children that they're raising are going to, it's a jewel that you can't really replace, for them to have a present father in their lives. Because unfortunately, I was married and my ex-husband was there, but he wasn't present like he should have been, for various reasons. But I like to see, and I'm glad that you're saying this, kind of hoping that other men are, when they have the opportunity to impart that information to their friends, co-workers, that those are just things that are being spoken away from the women.
I remember reading somewhere that that whole myth of the absent Black father is really like tied to the amount of Black women that are not married, right? When they have children. And for some reason, it's just like automatically assumed, well, if they're not married, then this person isn't present, which isn't necessarily the case. You know, a lot of times the relationship doesn't work out, but you still have two parents that are present.
Right.
And for some reason, we keep holding on to this image of the absent Black father.
Right.
And I know many, many Black men that are involved in their children's lives. You know, my past relationships didn't work out, but they're present in some way, in some fashion, some form. They're present, and my children have a relationship with their dads. You know.
It's stuck. Yeah, so I'm glad to hear this, because again, although a lot of times we do.
I don't know. Outside of.
You were stuck a minute. Okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
yeah,
Sarah.
everything just went
Go
away
ahead.
for a second.
Yeah, go ahead. You want to finish that?
I was just saying, outside of using voices, like Kai using his voice, I don't know how else we can dispel that myth.
Right.
I think if I could touch on that, Debbie.
Sure.
I try to lead through action, right? I can tell you, and I always tell people, I'm pretty decent at speaking, but I'm better at showing you. You know, I'm showing up to these meetings with my son. When I'm coming out to town, or where I got my youth with me. I have a sports scoop. He's in the back seat. He have his little fan hooked up to his car seat. I think that they have to see it more, you know. And although some of us feel like it's a myth, my grandfather had 28 kids. There's no way you could be present for 28 kids. You know, my dad had kids that he doesn't even know about. So I'm like 28 meeting a brother that's been around for 20 plus years I never knew existed. And genetics are so real, because he operates very much the way I do. And I'm like, wow, you live in London, I live in St. Croix. How is this possible, right? So no, I think that's how it's more than voice. People need to see it, and people need to normalize it. And to your point, Debbie, like West Gill really did an awesome job of showing us in a huge way. Like, here how many dads are in these children's lives. You know what I mean? Like, here's a picture of it, and I think that is gonna embark a change, hopefully, or a chain reaction at very least, to seeing more active parenting. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, definitely. Well, I thank you for that, and for your honesty in talking about that. And I also wanted to talk about, in terms of what you saw growing up, how did that also affect you in relationships? I came from parents that were divorced. I didn't think I was going to be divorced. I'm divorced. I came from a family, though, where there's still a lot that were married. So I saw both ends. My mom had friends that were married, friends that were single. And so for me, I automatically wanted to be married. But I'm sure that not seeing it every day probably affected how I showed up in relationship. Can't say the same for my ex, because he had his parents, but everybody has their stuff, right? But how has that, or how do you think it has affected you in how you have shown up in your relationships as well?
Oh, I could jump right in. In past relationships, I didn't have healthy examples of what healthy communication looks like in a relationship. The healthiest relationship I have ever seen was my brother and his wife. I love to see them interact. I love every time we're around them. It's just awesome. But they were in the Air Force, so they were like spending time, 2, 3 years in Germany or in Turkey or in Louisiana. So it wasn't a lot of consistent time with these, this healthy couple. And they're 10, my brother's 10 years older than me. So they got married really young, 18. And so I was still a little kid. I was 7, 8 years old. I didn't understand the dynamics, and then I didn't get to spend a lot of time around them. But the relationships that I was around, they weren't very healthy. I didn't have those examples, and I went into 2 relationships that I showed up in a really unhealthy way. Those are toxic relationships, and I was a part of that toxicity. I take ownership for that 100%. But those experiences, me being able to sit back and reflect on those relationships, is why this current relationship is as healthy as I could ever dream of it being. But yeah, growing up, like it helped to shape me into this like unhealthy partner. Not the ideal.
So this is gonna sound kind of weird, but my parents are still married. My parents got married when I was like 3, and so they've been together over 30 years. For me, actually, my parents being married may have worked in reverse. So for me, like I had those communication skills. I knew how to communicate in a healthy way, how to show up as your authentic self, all of that. But for me, there was a definite fear of being alone. Like, how are you alone as an adult? How do you raise a child by yourself when there's a relationship that's not good for you? How do you do that? Um, and I think that fear of being alone was manipulated by that other person in a very real way, and it that kept me in a situation way longer than I needed to be. And so for me, I had that great relationship in my parents, and honestly, with one side of my family, for the longest, I was literally the divorced person. And we're talking about a family with like hundreds of people, aunts and uncles and cousins, but like I was the divorced person on that side of the family. Um, and that was hard, honestly. And that divorce really felt like this, or the idea of even getting divorced felt like a very real failure. It
Mm.
almost to the point of it becoming like a fear. So for me, even though I had that great, healthy relationship, it actually, for me, kind of was negative in some ways, which is crazy to say because it's great. My parents are together, but
But
I had to get over that.
it could have been that you saw that and necessarily didn't see the red flags in the person that you got married to,
Mhm.
for various reasons. But
Yeah.
because you saw that in your family lineage, people staying together, again, that made you stay longer
Yeah.
than you probably should have,
Yeah.
but everything is a life lesson, right?
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
how about you, Kai?
Oh man, I'm just kind of trying to go through the different thoughts. So I think again, harkening back to the past, I was raised by a lot of single women, so I became obsessed with what they thought about, what they listened to. So this song keeps on coming up. I don't want to know if you're cheating. Keep it on the low, right? I don't know if I don't want to know. And I was just like, why is she always playing that song? I'm like 8, 9 years old. I'm singing along. I have no idea about relationships. Um, and it just made me almost become like a professional dater. Like I told my wife the other day, like honestly, I haven't been single at any junction in my life. Like it's always been these long, meaningful relationships. I never really like slept around like that, even though like I feel like that was a part of my mystique to a lot of people. You know, that I could have, but I always was just like in these very committed relationships most of my life. And I had one really awesome couple to look at, which was my great uncle and my great aunt, and they've been married for 50 years, 50 plus years. Hyper traditional, and it's like that is what I've always kind of said. Okay, that's the ideal, right? But I was always cognizant of what it would take to get to that ideal. And again, like relationships are work, right? I think we romanticize them,
Right.
but the effort you have to put into growing with someone, the effort you have to put into saying, I'm going to compromise here, I'm going to put a stance down here, I'm going to draw a boundary here. That's effort. And I think that our generation in particular, everything is instant gratification, microwave, iPhone, and they're so stuck in that mode that they're losing sight of what it really takes to have a genuine partner. And I mean, and I know I might be generalizing, guys, so try to pull me back if need be. But from my perspective, from my even like stepping out and looking around and like listening to other women and men in relationships, I'm like, bro, you're not putting in the time, you're not putting in the effort, even to getting to know that person, knowing what that and I think that like the physicality that exists, especially in that Caribbean blood, right? We're very physical, right? The way we dance, the way we speak, the way we eat, everything is so visceral. However, it's the how do I say it? It's the intangibles.
Right.
That's what really keeps. It's the stuff that's not said. It's
Right.
that I'm to bed mad and you don't care enough to ask me what's taking place, right? And I think when you talk to other women, I spend a lot of time doing that. But when you speak to other women, you realize that those are the mechanisms that led to the deterioration of the relationships. It was all the questions that wasn't asked in the right time. It was all of these like unsaid things that went unnoticed. And I think that, you know, I'm only saying this because like I hope that some people are listening to take this advice into their relationships and it helps them with its longevity. Because I think so many of us are dragging our broken selves into other relationships and then breaking other people because we haven't from last relationships, right? And that's my biggest fear in seeing my generation is that like you ain't healed from this one, but you're
But
with
you
this
jump into that.
and now he is paying for the last guy, and it's just like you're collecting bodies. You know what I mean? So I don't know if
Right.
I answered your questions, but again, seeing my great aunt and my great uncle stay together for 50 years and that being something to work towards, it really forced me into a space to strategically look at my relationship and say, how am I going to build this? I'm not putting us on Facebook. We're not going to be Facebook official in these first years because women who want you will say things, right? To mess up your relationship. So I was just very strategic. And I know that sounds weird because love needs to be free flowing and unconditional and all these great words. But in truth, you gotta be protective of what you have. You know, your
Yeah.
iPhone has a 6-digit code to protect certain things. What makes you think you shouldn't protect your woman or your man? You know what I mean? And
Right.
yeah, so I will pass the mic back to you now, Debbie. But like again, that's where my mind is at.
But there's also this reliance on social media. Like, I've been with people where they would literally say, well, I knew you were okay because you posted on Facebook today. You
Hmm?
didn't ask me if I was okay. Oh yeah, like it's a total thing. It's insane. And a post has absolutely nothing to do with how I am, who I am, actually getting to know me very authentically and organically.
Right.
I think a lot of that is just missing from our generation, unfortunately.
Yeah, when I reflect on old posts on like Facebook, right? And I specifically the end of my last relationship and was kind of going through like everything that was there, right? Because I was very open and very kind of like free flowing, right? Okay. Um, and I look back at it, like Siobhan, to your point, there was so much that was going on during these times that I was posting that everything seemed fine. Everything seemed like like we were okay, we were happy, and we weren't. And someone just looking from the outside would have said, like, oh, they've been together for so long and things are good. And it wasn't.
Right.
And my current partner now, like, he was very intentional in the beginning about not being too public. And even now, like, you go through our stuff, like, maybe there's a couple of posts here or there, maybe there's a couple of pictures, but there's not a whole lot. And at first, I couldn't get into that mindset of protecting and preserving what we had. Like, I didn't understand it, and it was kind of frustrating for me. But like now, if you know us, or if you engage in a conversation with one or both of us, you get to understand a little bit of the dynamics of our relationship. But otherwise, like, the way we operate and how we keep this running, that's ours,
Right.
and it's precious and it's delicate and it deserves to be protected.
You're right. Because I think about people who like, and again, it's this whole social media thing and whatever, and people put up a post that there was someone, and then you seen all these pictures, and then over a short period of time, then you're not seeing nothing no more. So then, and it's like, I don't know. I feel protection is very necessary, especially in a fledgling relationship. I always say my sister, and her other half have been together for, I think this year is 27 years, a long time, and she's very, I mean, that's my sister. And she's private about her relationship. They both are. Ever so often, they'll try to reel me into one of their stuff. And I'm just like, listen, I don't want to have nothing, because they're going to say that. And 2 seconds later, they're laughing and joking. So I have learned, I just stay out of it. Right. But I really, really do respect the fact that they do keep their relationship private. And again, I think that, like you said, you protect other things. So why not protect that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think some people now think it's game, right? But that's how society has kind of framed privacy. Like, grandma would go only argue with grandpa in the room. Now we arguing without, you bring in my great aunt. I always say, don't bring adult stuff to little children, or don't bring little children into adult things. I'm sure I'm butchering the old people way of saying it, which is also right. But you get my main point here. Like, there's just certain things that need to stay behind closed doors. And then to your other point too, like, when things are posted, now people feel like they're in your relationship. You know what I mean? Now you break up with this person for whatever reason, because things really weren't that great. Now you got like 200, 400 people that are as committed to this great looking relationship as they did in your business.
For
I'm
real.
saying, like, yo, you gotta like
And sometimes they're more committed than the people in it.
you check it out. Like, man, it's just our society right now is just being morphed into this like very weird space. You're seeing people argue and put their lives out on this social media thing. Then you're seeing employers take that information and say, well, this is the reason why we can't hire you. Like, the impacts of these things scale so many places. And like, I feel like I'm this old soul in a young body in this twisted generation. It's like, yo, guys, get it back in the bedroom, close the door, handle it there. You know what I mean? And
Right.
it's something that might be hard to put back in a box, Debbie. I don't know, but again, I'm not trying to push your conversation in a different. Just want to make sure that I'm always cognizant of that's the societal impact again. You know what I mean? Like, you're going into these rooms with HR and they're printing out pages of your social media. Like, this is real life. You know what I mean? And then you're having to defend those things. And
Right.
a lot of people can't defend half the stuff they say out there, right? So, like, hey, how you going to deal with that? You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's true.
Yeah, well, it's this thought that, I mean, if you start with this, the tree is that everything that you think and do matters and is fodder and material. And so, I mean, relationships just end up being kind of this extension of that same poisonous tree.
Right.
But for me, it's just, I don't
But do
subscribe
you
to that
also,
one at all.
most of your friends, counterparts, the people that you are around, how do you feel like they kind of align with the same way you feel about relationships, or do you think you're the anomaly amongst most of the people that you associate with or related to?
I truly believe birds of a feather flock together. I 100% buy into that. My aunt said that my great grandfather, Alfredo Andrew, said, "Show me your company, and I'll tell you who you are." Right? I buy into that 100%. So in the context of that we're in now, yeah, like I believe my wife and I have set a legacy that our friends are now emulating. I grew up not knowing weddings really, you know what I mean? Distant memories. Again, I was around mainly single folks. Now I'm going to like 4 and 5 weddings every year for friends because they see the love that my wife and I have cultivated. And again, this is work. So if you're joining at the 45th minute of this conversation, rewind. This is work. You know what I mean? You're having to sit down and have tough discussions. You're having to step on. Listen, we're not going to eat until we get this out and open. And after we eat, we won't talk through this again because your mouth empty and we could really talk. No, I'm serious.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Oh, let's iron this out. We're not going outside wearing wrinkly clothes. We're not doing that, right? Because your friends are watching. Just like little children, your friends are watching. They're listening to your conversations. They're trying to gauge the temperament of your wife because of a 2-second conversation they heard, and you can't buy into that. And so many times I've seen it with women and men that they go to this friend that's single and miserable, get advice that then just like torpedo their relationship. You know what I mean? Because misery love company. You check
Right.
it. And I've always been told that you tend to go to the people who you know are going to give you certain advice. You know what I mean? So you don't go to that miserable friend if you want miserable advice. So that's really on you. You know what I mean? Check that. Go to your wife needs to be your best friend. Your husband ought to be your best friend. You ought to be able to talk about anything with them. And then my last point before giving it to Tamara Siobhan is that I honestly believe you don't gotta tell your person everything. There's just certain things you don't want to tell your wife because she ain't gonna never forget certain things, and vice versa too. You know what I mean? And I remember telling my boy that same piece of advice around a campfire in Atlanta, next to his wife, next to his woman. Excuse me, she didn't because it was a fiance at the point at that time. And he's like, "What you talking about, man? I tell my woman anything, this everything." Da, 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 da. They're not together today because of things he said. You know what I mean? It's because like literally you have to be able to filter, and it's a delicate situation like Tamara's saying. Handle it as such. Know how to talk to your woman, know when to say certain things. And you should be able to gauge that based on the input and time you put into that relationship.
True.
Yeah, when you asked the question, I was thinking about the people closest to me, like my actual circle, right? Not just the people that are followers or I follow or we're friends on a social media platform, but my actual circle. I can honestly say I do not know what's going on in their relationship if I don't talk to them. And even then, I don't know, unless there's like a major thing that they need to let me know, like we're doing fine, great.
Right.
Yeah, I think for the most part, everybody keeps their relationship very private, or like some of the people in my circle don't go on social media at all. Like they're just not ascribing to it. He was talking about this thing you mentioned about not saying certain things, and because of how it might be received and how the repercussions for that stuff. And it stood out to me because I am 100% of the mindset that people need to have their own rules for their relationship. Whatever works for you. If you like it, I love it. If it is, but if it's working and it's healthy, right? That's what you do. And if you tell each other everything, then awesome for you. But if you gonna try to tell each other everything, there's this requirement, right, to understand your partner, right, and get to know them in the most intimate way possible, and have like an underlying respect for them, so that whatever they come to you with, it doesn't come with judgment from you, right? Because you know why, you know where, you know how, they became the person that did, that said, that felt that way, and you ain't gonna use it as ammunition. There's I don't go on too long, right?
No,
But
go ahead.
there's this psychologist couple, John Gottman, and I keep forgetting the wife name all the time. No disrespect, I just can if I don't stick. And they've had the underlying foundation of like a healthy relationship is what they call developing a love map.
Mm.
And it's this like intricate map of your partner, right? Understanding the ins and outs, the highs, the lows, the ugly, the beautiful, the raw and unfiltered pieces of them. Because when you take the time and you invest the energy in getting to know them in that way, you to develop this mutual respect. They're learning you in that way, you learning them in that way. It's really hard to take these things that you know about them and all of a sudden throw them in their face and like punish them with the information when you actually love and respect them. And that'll come with communication. And I think you had like and Siobhan, like you both alluded to it, like communication is necessary. And I think that's a lot of what I didn't witness growing up. That communication piece is big, 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 big. My relationship started off long distance for a long time, and that communication got us to where we are now because we talk about I don't think there's anything we didn't talk about in that time. And I developed such a respect for this man. You know what I mean? That it was like, even if I don't understand and I don't agree with something, the kind of respect I have for him, I ain't gonna be like, yeah, it is nonsense and straight in his face. You know what I mean? Like, I can't punish him with the information.
Right.
That's
Good.
Yeah, and that's me when you were talking about the love map. Like, I'm the person that I want to, like, if we go to a restaurant and I'm like, okay, it's 77 degrees outside, they're wearing a flannel shirt and like they had a bad day at work, they want the muscles. Like, literally, I want to know you so well that no matter what the situation is, I can order exactly what you want, like, period, top to bottom, and just know you that deeply and know everything about you. And not because I plan to use it ever as ammunition, but just because, like, if I say that I love a person, I think that means that I love every corner, nook, cranny, even they stinky farts them, like just everything top to bottom.
Right.
And I think that requires, some level of intimacy and be willing to kind of peel back the layers and like say, okay, this is my sensitive soft spot. Please don't harm it. So for me, that communication is everything. But I was thinking about that social media question too. And my friends, we are not, like, I'm actually the most social media active out of all of them, which does
Wow.
not say a lot at all. That's actually very scary. But we just tend to be very, like, authentic in our relationships, even when we go out with each other. I mean, we don't like pick up our phones. We're not, um, taking selfies, and like we just don't, like, you would think that I go absolutely nowhere with my friends because I just don't have those pictures out there for the
Right.
ones that are closest to me. So
That's,
yeah, I guess birds of a feather flock together, right?
100%.
well,
100%.
that's good. That's good. Grantley was saying her name is Julia, I think, for you, Tamara. The person you were speaking about, the wife. I don't know if her name is Julia. I think he put there,
Maybe Julie.
or Julie. Okay.
Yeah.
And so what made, we see a lot of people now. I mean, it's weird because like you were saying, Kai, in one aspect, when I'm looking on social media, I'm seeing all these people getting married and I'm like, wow. But then the other aspect of it, I'm hearing people saying, no, I'm not going to get married. We're just going to, we'll just live together, whatever the situation is. Maybe because they've had, it's like PTSD from a bad relationship or whatever. What made you all decide that you wanted to be married?
That's deep. Let's bridge it for 2 seconds. I think with that love map that Tamara described, it's rooted in getting to know your partner's parents. I don't believe you can truly love someone until you've met the people that has raised that person. Because there's so many of those personal characteristics that your partner has that comes directly from their parents, right? And when you see it, then you end up unconditionally loving that person's flaws because sometimes those flaws are stemming from that parent or those parents. And that's super key. So I want to make sure to pass that on before, tackling the next question, right? What made me want to get married, I believe was the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. I do think in society, marriage is somewhat like the top of the mountain as far as being wholesome. I'm a businessman, and a lot of times in those circles, that ring on the finger shows that okay, someone is a serious, that you're a person worth investing in and worth locking down.
Right.
Two, you have someone that my wife can hang with. You know what I mean? As we tackle ventures, whatever that would look like. That's that, right? On a serious note, I knew I would marry my wife the first day I saw her, and that sounds, however that sounds to you, that's my reality. You know, after in my mind, after 5 years of being with someone, of someone being with me. Let me rephrase that. After 5 years of someone being with me, they deserve a ring. You know what I mean? That was always my thing because I'm hard to be with. Yeah. But I think that very seriously, she wanted to be married. You know, even though it may have been something like I could have done. See, my grandmother didn't get married until they were 60. Right? They were together for like 40 years before getting married. It was something that she really wanted. It was something that was in her fabric of seeing relationships progress and evolve. I definitely wasn't going to be the reason why, or the reason why that didn't happen for her, right? So I definitely think that there wasn't guilt, there was just some like knowing that that's what she really wanted. And then at that point, it's just like it felt so natural, you know. It was like, man, I'd been with her for 8 years. I was just waiting for the right moment. It happened beautifully, you know what I mean? We got married in the Frederickstead Fort. She went up the lift, you know, right next to the cannons. It was just gorgeous, man. You know, and it's one of those things like, yeah, definitely don't rush into marriage either, you know? Like,
Right.
I think so many people are trying to check a box, and sometimes you end up devastating your lives because it's also a legal contract, right?
Yeah.
Between not only you and your person, but you, your person, and the state. You know what I mean? And
For real.
the state their benefits, and that state is going to split those things up, and they want those lawyers to be paid, and they're going to be paid that $300 an hour. You know what I mean?
Shabbat.
Right? So I'm just saying, you know, like definitely take it seriously. You can knock me for waiting 8 years, but I've been with her for 12 now. I don't see us ever stopping. You know what I mean? So I don't know about you guys.
I think it was that societal norm for me, right? You in a long-term relationship, the culmination is marriage, right? That's what you're gonna do. That didn't work twice, right? That mindset didn't work. In my current relationship, it just felt like the natural progression of things. It wasn't a box that needed to be checked. It wasn't a mark of success. I think I don't know, there were some technical aspects of like, okay, if we get married, it also allows us to do some things, but it just felt like what we wanted to do at the same time, you know? We had spoken about it before, and I think we were on different pages at one point. And then at one fast forward, and we're just like, yeah, this is it. This is what we're doing, you know? And for us, our wedding was different. In the middle of COVID, when I don't know if they're still allowing this, right? But my brother-in-law was the officiant, right? And over Zoom. And we were in a park. It was us, the kids, him on Zoom. And that's how we did it. It was just us.
Wow.
I think maybe there are a couple of pictures online, maybe like 4 total. But it was a super private, it was a private decision, and it was a private event. And it just felt like the thing that we wanted to do, you know, to make whatever official, you know, like I don't have the exact words to describe it, but it felt like it was necessary.
So for me, my ex and I, we'd been together for like 8 years at the time when got in, we got married. At the time we got engaged, I think it was like right around 7 years. I think for us, it was kind of like you were just checking the box. Like it was like, what's next? What's coming next? What are we doing next? But it wasn't necessarily this is what we need to do to take our relationship to the next level, or I don't think so. And I don't think necessarily for him, he understood exactly what a marriage was either. So that kind of complicated the entire transaction, let's call it a transaction, and culminated in 4 years of terrible.
I completely understand. But are you because of it, would you like to be married one day again, or you're not there yet? Okay.
I would. And I think I have actually gotten to a point where now when I'm dating someone, like I'm really looking at that, whether or not it's something that would work overall, not just for me, but also for my daughter too.
Right.
But I think for a while I was kind of like, there is no way I'm getting married again. That was the worst experience of my life. 0 stars. But 6 years has done the trick now, I think. And yeah, I would. To the right person. It would have to be like right person, right situation. We fit. There's a very, organic connection, that type thing.
Cool.
It wouldn't be for convenience.
Cool. That's good. You wanted to say something, Kai?
No, I was just preparing myself.
Oh, okay. No, the reason why I asked that is because, again, I know, and again, it's age and where you are in your life. I when I first got divorced, for me, I was like, I want to get married again. I know that this is not about the institution of marriage. What happened was because we just were not supposed to be together, right? And I wouldn't blame one person for, thousands of people that are hundreds of thousands of people that are out there, right? But then I hear like a lot of people who say, no, I'll never get married again. I'll be in a long-term relationship, but it's not, I don't want it. There's nothing about marriage I want. I've done it. I've been there. I'm good. So for you, Siobhan, it's good to hear. I mean, you've allowed time, which is very important. And again, working on you and self-love and self-care and what, like we've had Dr. Reynolds on before.
A lot of that.
Yeah. He talked about, the importance of getting yourself healthy so that you can see the red flags sooner. And then you also understand what it is that you really want. Because I always say this about relationships. People get in a relationship. Why? Why did you get in a relationship? Did you even ask yourself that question? And the same thing goes for marriage. Why? Why are you doing it? And I think that you should be able to answer those questions before you take it to those next levels.
And knowing like what fills your love box and what does not. I think you cannot rely on another person to kind of like figure it out and play like this guessing game,
right?
What you want. I think that there is a degree to which, yes, you want to be with someone that could kind of anticipate needs and be, very empathetic. That's important. But then there's also that part where you need to know what you need and what things are important to you in a relationship, or else you're just wasting everyone's time.
Yeah,
correct.
And I'll throw in another piece, right? Like I just say this all the time. We walk around developing these, like, people say, well, he checks all the boxes, right? We have this checklist of these ideal partners, and they have to be this, and they have to do that, and they have to, be this kind of person and these values. And that's great, right? Make the list for sure. you need to know like the kind of partners and what's, you know, like what's a go and what's a definite no for you. But then when you develop the list of that ideal partner, you need to make a second list. And the second list is, what are all the qualities that type of partner would need to nurture a healthy relationship, to nurture all of these amazing qualities that you want, right? And then do that self-reflection. Do I embody these things? Am I the type of partner that can nurture that type of partner? And if not, then we have work to do, you know?
Right. You're right. You're absolutely, and I think I've seen, like, I haven't seen it in a while, but I did see, I can't remember if it wasn't a TikTok. It was something, a story or something, and somebody made a point about that, about, you know, you're writing all these things that you want, but do you embody those things as well, you know? So people need to really be cognizant of that when they're requiring things from other people. We only have 20 more minutes because, like I tell you, this goes by quickly. But one of the things I definitely want to ask you guys is, what advice would you give to your friends, or to your younger self, as it relates to love, dating, marriage, relationships?
Thanks. You know me, I'm always trying. All right.
Bridge that gap.
Yeah, I try to bridge real quick. I brought up a really salient point. Like, in this day and age, what it takes to be a successful Black man with locks, especially if that's one of your boxes that you'd like to see, check out. A lot of women like locks, all right, whatever, right? But what it takes to be that man is a great deal of time put into being outside the house, right? So if you're a woman that demands certain amount of time inside the house, then there's a natural conflict there. So I wanted to give a tangible example to what Tamara laid out so beautifully. Yeah. Okay. Boom. So, advice to a younger Kai: continue on the path that God has laid out for you. I think that committing to yourself is so important, right? Knowing thyself is so important, and they make you feel guilty for trying to know who you are within this ever-changing landscape. They try to make you feel guilty for being confident in your confidence. You know what I'm saying? They make you feel as if you're then conceited for believing that, you know, God got more for you than filling out spreadsheets for Bloomberg. Yeah. So, you know, remain true to yourself is always going to be my advice, not only to myself, but to anybody. And finding out who that self is, I think for me, reveals what your true purpose here is on earth. I believe that God has sent us here for a reason. And so many people die without finding out that reason because they never take time to find out who they are. So that would be my piece of advice to myself.
Yvonne, Tamara?
Mine with marriage that I always give to my friends is just, you know, I always tell them to show up as you. I think that's one thing that didn't always happen, was that I think sometimes you show up as like the person, or try to be the person the other person wants, as opposed to showing up as yourself. And there's only so long that you can do that for. It's not a realistic expectation of yourself. But when you show up as you, and when I say you, meaning like you're bringing everything to the table, even the things that make you vulnerable, the things that make you scared, all of those things, most of the time, because we all know narcissists exist, most of the time that will have a good result. As far as my younger self, the thing that I would tell my younger self is just, you know, don't have that fear of being with yourself. It's okay to be with yourself. I think some of the best trips, like before I used to have this whole fear of like traveling by myself, you know, now like there are years I will do like 50,000 miles by myself. Like, and that's okay. I mean, it doesn't bother me. Because, I've gotten to a place where I am okay being by myself. And that took a while, but it's it's a place where I needed to get to. And I wish that I got to that place when I was a lot younger as opposed to now.
You're still young. How about you, Tamara?
And I've been thinking about this one, right? Because I would tell myself so many things. Younger me, give yourself grace, because even the things that feel like the worst mistakes are sometimes just the biggest life lessons. I think echoing show up authentically as you. It's totally okay to be you. Those who like you, they'll be there. Those who don't could go fly a kite, and go to therapy sooner. Oh, go to therapy sooner. If I could tell my younger self
That's a good one.
anything, is go to therapy sooner, to figure stuff out a little earlier, and save everyone close to you and yourself some of the struggle and the hardship that you guys had to go through.
That's excellent. That's excellent. And again, that too is something that has been resonating a lot. And I really hope people take heed to get therapy. We had someone on the show, Karabo. She's an attorney as well. And she gets counseling, and it's not because necessarily she needs it, but it's something she started and she enjoys it. And even just in life planning and decision making has helped her to be her better self. And so again, a lot of people think like you only need therapy when there's problems, but sometimes even when you don't think there's issues or things that you need to tackle, it's still good. And even Dr. Reynolds has said, even if you don't do that one-on-one therapy, even again,
You breaking up for anybody else?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is there gonna be like this awkward pause in the video now?
Yeah,
know, right?
yeah. Just like silence. No, but I mean, she's right about the talk about counseling and therapy. Like it's becoming something now more than I ever seen before. And I wish, but that's me being biased, right? I'm a counselor. I wish everyone would go to therapy, because even if it's just finding them connections, the things that go together, like, and the reasons why, having a deeper understanding of self, like that's enough. You don't have to have a problem,
And
Sorry.
therapy to be therapeutic, but Debbie's back. I know she called
Yeah.
me.
Oh, she froze again.
Oh man. What were you saying, Kai?
No, that was my one-liner. It came up one time I was speaking. I'm like, therapy is meant to be therapeutic, and just like so many other things in the Black community, I felt as if therapy was demonized, and for what reason? It really is just getting to hear your own thoughts sometimes, even if it's with someone that has no bearing or weighing on your life at all. Just getting to hear yourself articulate certain things that maybe, especially in coming from relationships where there isn't that much communication going on, being able to enter a space where you're forced to communicate, I think is so necessary, and to have done so at an early age would have been, I think for many people, transforming, right? And yeah, we're missing that in this community. But I'm really interested to hear like what advice would you give to men as women at this age with so many experience now? What advice would you give to a young man that's trying to maybe be faithful in a relation in a time where bust chest is the reality, right? Like let's call it a spade a spade. These women out here are not playing that anymore. So like what advice would you give to us in this space?
Siobhan, you want to go?
I was gonna let you go first. I'm thinking that's a good one.
Yeah, I'm thinking too. Like I feel like that work on self is really important so that you could end up picking partners that are aligned with like the same values and the same mindset, so we could avoid all of that. I don't need to be connected to people that aren't aligned with the same mindset, perspective, and value and principles that I have. If they have it, then I need to find some other group of people or another person to be connected to avoid all of that. Because I think when we're younger, we don't see how expensive emotionally and energy wise it is to be involved in those situations. But like at 38, I'm like, I don't have those reserves of energy and emotions to invest in like drama and toxicity. You know what I mean? But hindsight is 2020. So I say do the work on self, but I know what that perspective can be, when you're younger.
Yeah. I mean, I wish that all men would go to therapy. And like I think now it's so much easier because you don't have to like walk into an office and have people stare at you. You can literally do it in your room, like face to face with someone just like this, in a place that's comfortable. And I think the other part of it too, that's missing is, I would say the communication is a huge thing. I think if you should pick a woman that you can talk to, and very much feel like that's a person that cares for you and they got your back. Like if you don't feel that, then you shouldn't be with that person, because there are women that are absolutely toxic also. It goes both ways. But I think sometimes that, with there may be this focus on the physical, or there may be this focus on, the clout that being with that person might bring, and not what is actually like who the person is at their core, and whether or not they are a good person for you to be around. I think that would be most of my advice. If I had a son, that's what I would tell him.
That's deep. Yeah, no, the value, whatever you said really made me think of like a value judgment, right? And like how you prioritize those values in your life. And I think when you are younger, like there are just certain things, the materialism and these things that trump what's so genuinely needed in relationships. Samara said, it's taxing to go through those relationships that you shouldn't be in, right? Like you're just in there because for whatever reason this person maybe is clout, maybe is whatever that case is. But I'm after this conversation, I find myself a bit more hopeful. To have met you, beautiful individuals, makes me a bit more hopeful that maybe this generation does have some hope, right? Maybe this generation does have a chance, because I find myself to be a bit pessimistic in that end for some reason. I'm super optimistic about everything else, but when I see other relationships where I just see how people fall apart and what they do to their children, like knowing that's what happened to them, it's like, bro, you end up feeling a bit pessimistic. Like, how could you do the same thing to your youth that was done to you, But after tonight, I do feel a bit more hopeful that, there are people out there trying to guide the collective whole towards something that makes sense.
No, I totally get where you're coming from. When you were talking about, like people that are around your age and just kind of looking around, like almost feeling like you're so much older in some ways, feeling like you're almost like this old soul. I feel that so often. I feel like sometimes with, not the people that are in my circle, but like outside of my circle, it just, feels like we're not moving in a way that would allow us to be in these relationships that lead to marriage. Um, and it's a little worrisome, honestly. And for you to say that you go to 4 or 5 weddings a year, I'm like, oh, because
Yeah.
most of my friends they're all already married. So I've had one wedding this year. It was actually 2 weeks ago, my best friend. But either that or they have been like perpetually single for a decade, and there's not really anything in between. It's just those two extremities. And most of those people that are married met the person they were with when they were in college or high school and not really as adults. So
You know
I don't
what?
know.
What's cool though is like we are literally the people that are preparing the next generation to be somebody's partner, right? Whether it's their spouse or just like a romantic partner or whatever the situation is, like we get the chance to help prepare them. Sometimes the things my turn they used to joke around. I would say something that was it. I kind of deep or whatever, and they'd be like, "Oh, hashtag therapist mom," right? But for real, like I don't hear them spitting back some gems when they talk about like relationships and friendships and boundaries and what they're not going to put up with. I'd be like, maybe I doing a decent job, and same likewise, kind of like hearing what you guys have had to say. Like, I'm like, yeah, maybe they have a chance. They have a chance at avoiding some of the pitfalls that we either experienced personally or witnessed. So it's cool.
That's deep. And then I know that I would love to give Debbie the space to close out her program, and she wanted to be done at 10. And I ain't mad about that closeout time, I gotta admit to you, right? But how do you feel about, because we're speaking about like the serial single friends we have, right? And it's just like they look like they have no chance. And I'm always so big on this, like, there just aren't enough men or women, but surely not enough men really that have done the work to find themselves that would then build them up to be a man worth calling a husband. You check what I'm saying? And it's like, do you like how does that feel? Is that like something like you look around and you're like, man, there just aren't that many options? Or do you feel like, there are options but people aren't really ready to take them on? Does that make sense?
There's I hate to put it this way, but there are not a lot of options, honestly. Um, for me, especially because I've done so much of that self work. Yay! Especially since I've done so much of that self work. Um, you can recognize when someone has not. And for me, I don't ask for anyone to be perfect because God knows I am not, and I am absolutely full of flaws, and I still have more to fix, under construction. But at the end of the day, there just are not a lot of people that are doing the work. I mean, I think that it is important for like married people to have married friends, and I get that because I've been there. But I think especially in our community, I think like some of these married friends, like you need to invite like some single guys in there every once in a while, just so like they can see what these relationships look like and what they require, and so that it could be normalized to some degree. Um, as opposed to, I think sometimes like married people like being on their own island sometimes, which I get. Like I said, I've been there, but there's a degree to which like you need to bring some people over to your side too,
Yeah, because and it's sort of like what Kai said. It's not just what you say; it's how you show up, and so they need to actually see that so that they can emulate it. Not exactly be the way you are in your relationship, but just to see what healthy relationships look like. Relationships where people really are fighting for that relationship. Because if they didn't come from that, it's not normalized for them, and all this extra social media stuff is just fluff, so to know someone and to know that every day they're working on this relationship is really good, for you to have some of those single friends involved. um in your
Yeah.
not involved in your relationship, but at least to witness your relationship.
Yeah. And I think it's important to also like recognize all of the barriers that people push through to be able to do this work, right? Because we have societal norms and expectations, and we have all of this pressure for men to not be vulnerable and not be soft and not be seen as weak, and but then we also want them to do the work and explore their feelings and be able to communicate effectively. And how do they do that if they don't actually feel the things? And like there's a lot of pressure on men, women too, but like on men to show up but don't show up, do the work but don't be too soft, you know what I mean? And recognizing sometimes those are the barriers that close off options. Like Siobhan was saying, like there are not a lot of options because there's so many barriers in place, so we have to figure out how we break those barriers.
Exactly. Well, I want to apologize. We're having like weird weather here, so I think that just screwed up our whole internet. I was like, Deja, what's going on? Duh. So I'm glad that I was able to come back. I want to thank you guys. Like I've told you before, this will not be the last, because we need to continue these conversations. Again, this platform is to create, emulate, support, encourage healthy relationships in our communities, and to set new legacies of what healthy looks like. And healthy is not perfect. Healthy just means you're working on it, and you're trying to be as positive as possible in it. But I want to thank all of you, Siobhan, Tamara, Kai. And I want to thank also all those people who logged in tonight. I just want to read one thing. Valerie said, I'm so proud of you, young people. Your insight, transparency, openness to growth, and positive attitude is so refreshing. Blessings on you all. So people are appreciative of what you have to say and how you're showing up in this world. I want to tell everybody, please be safe. We're still going through all this crazy stuff. And I wish everybody well, and I'll see you back here next week, Thursday.
That's it. Bless.